Cool. So for recording purposes, there was a thread in Slack where Chad was discussing with some of the plan PMs about prioritization of a vintage issue about board list layout. And we were talking a bit in the thread, and he has some interesting feedback about his use cases in his team. So I want to collect some info on that. I'm going to share this recording with Nick Brandt. He's the DRI for boards. Yeah, we'll see what we can do about this stuff. I'm interested to see what it is.
Okay. So I don't know if you have a script or anything, but if you want, I can show you our use case, what our board looks like, which is a little bit different. And then also what I'm basing a lot of my feedback on is how Pivotal Tracker behaves, which is a product I worked on for 13 years. And I obviously somewhat biasedly like the way it handled panels, and I could demo that. So if you want me to do that, those little screen share and demo now or later, whatever you feel like.
I think what I'd like to take a look at is the way that you and your team are using boards now. And then we can take a look at the stuff from Pivotal, because I want to get a sense for like what you're bumping your head on first.
Sure. And I mean, they're very related, like the way Pivotal handles it would exactly solve some of the problems we have. So you want me to screen share?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Are you allowed to do that? Sorry, I might need to enable that.
I can, I'll see. Try to ask. Yep, seems like it's letting me.
Yep.
And let me put you over here so I can see you. I don't think anything on here is confidential, but we'll see. So as you can see, our board does not look like a normal board. We do sort of a extreme programming inspired style of workflow that is emergent velocity. So we calculate our iterations based on the velocity. That's currently not possible in GitLab, but Dave's working on that. But we have this Chrome extension that I've hacked up that sort of matches up the API and hacks the CSS here and lets you do things, have this calculated iterations button here that will automatically inject the iterations. And just to give you a little better idea of the layout, let's say like we calculated over 10 past iterations instead of the default before, because we were pretty slow, didn't do anything in a summit. So you can see like there's a lot of scrolling that has to go on here, and I'm on a big screen, so all of this space here is wasted. So if using that JavaScript that I found on one of the comments of the issue that I mentioned here, you can see, okay, that made it better. Like kind of, maybe it added a couple more at the bottom, but there's still like a lot of extra vertical padding and margin here probably. You know, this looks weird, but whatever, not a big deal. But, you know, it'd be nice to just fit more on the screen and have a bigger density. So if you look at, here is Pivotal Tracker as an example. And I know I have my screen really big, but it's like intentional to show these layout issues. So same sort of thing, like a Kanban board type thing with calculated iterations. But down here on the left, you can see it's also got this different density of display. You can pick dense, which will really tighten up the padding and margin. You can have normal. There's also like a projector mode that puts them bigger. And then also there's this toggle here, which is panel width auto. So, which means if you toggle that on and off, well, first of all, like let's open up some extra panels, right? So like we got epics and labels and maybe the project history. So you can see how they resized to fit everything. We're not scrolling horizontally. And then if you were to turn off that panel with auto, then it gives you control over how big you want them to be. And then if you go back to the panel with auto and say, I was not on set to large screen, small form factor, it goes down to it'll resize to a certain breakpoint, but then after that, it would be too small to be visible. And likewise, if you close some of these, like there's still like a maximum width that they'll have, right? They're not just going to take up the entire width if they don't need to. If nothing, you see nothing here is wrapping, therefore it's not necessary. Whereas, this JavaScript was not that smart. So yeah, this is what I'm looking for. Like however many or few that you have, like it's gonna give you the maximum usage of your screen real estate. So I can stop sharing now.
Well, before you stop sharing,
Sure.
can we go back to your board? I want to ask
Regular mode or the JavaScript hack?
either way. Well, actually, would you mind looking at it whatever way you're normally really looking at it?
Yeah. So like if we're doing our iteration planning meeting and somebody doesn't have this JavaScript, installed in their toolbar or something, yeah, they're going to be stuck in this mode, which is.
But you all on your team are generally all using the plugin that you made, the Chrome extension you made?
Not necessarily. Like, if the developers are just looking at, what is a priority, a lot of times they will do this. But during our high-level planning and iteration planning meeting where we're reviewing, or especially where, we want to see, well, when do we expect to deliver something? A customer or stakeholders asking, when you expect to deliver something. Like I said, our velocity is like 2 now because of Summit, and didn't do a lot last week, but say our velocity was like 10, something more normal, or 5 or 8, then it lets us predict it. So yes, like whenever we're wanting to see what our iterations are calculated, we use this mode. We also have like a static text report that I generate like every 6 hours that's pinned to the top of our Slack channel that sort of gives the same information, but it's not as nice as looking at it on the board.
And what you're doing in your Chrome extension is basically just saying, let's look at adjacent cards and use the weight on those cards to try to make groups that fit.
No, it's more complicated than that. It's mashing up the API, reading all the stories from the API, reading the iteration data, which calculates the velocity for past iterations from the API. As you can see, it's also normally closed issues do not show up on boards at all. It's putting these closed issues in there dynamically. If closed issues are in the current iteration, it will show them at the top here. And it's inserting these iteration markers with the correct date spans, number of issues, and the points, all from the data that it calculated from the API. And it just uses the element data, like for example, the graph GUID and the issue ID to know where to jam all this stuff in there and hack it.
Interesting.
Which is not easy because this is hacking a view, like a minified rendered view component. So like I have no imports, no images. So this is emojis and pre-existing images and pre-existing styles all in a single JavaScript file. There's a lot of constraints to hacking it this way. But anyway, I'm just bragging now.
And I noticed this board is called Iteration Planning Remote Development. Do you use this board as like part of your day-to-day work, or is this board specifically just for doing the planning? Like when you pick up an issue, are you grabbing it off of this queue and moving it around, or are you?
Yeah, but like if you're normally like when in the pre-IPM, we have those sync, or in the iteration planning meeting, the pre-IPM is sort of where we decide which over here needs to be prioritized. We assign it for refinement. But once it's refined and prioritized over here in the prioritized lane, we have a sync meeting with as many of the team as can attend, and we go through everything that doesn't have a weight, and we rock, paper, scissors, we discuss it, make sure nobody has any blockers or some information that the person who refined it doesn't have, or it's like, oh no, that's going to be a death march, or oh no, you don't want to do it that way. Once make sure it's been refined properly, essentially, and then we rock, paper, scissors that do a Fibonacci 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, or above. Anything above a 5 is like an automatic veto. We don't, it's too big to prioritize, so it would get kicked back to refinement, like it shouldn't have been that big, or we missed something. So like during the, yes, these are, the answer to your question is these are only used during the IPM, but they're important then to like for the team to see the context of when the stuff is coming up. And you know what our next iterations look like.
And it looks like you're doing weekly iterations.
Yes. So yeah.
Okay, so basically you've hacked together a pivotal board for yourself, right? You've got your icebox on the left, you've got like your combined backlog and current iteration in the middle, and then you've got like a done column.
Yeah, the sort of the icebox is like the lower part of this stuff that is not planned to be prioritized, and then the upper part would be we hack that by assigning next 1 to 3 releases. So we don't necessarily manage the order on these boards. They sort of, we would like to, but because of issues with boards, like whenever you add something new, they go to the, with the ordering, right. Whenever you add something new, they go to the top, which kind of screws things up. So it's hard to rely on this for priority. But yeah, it's basically it's a Kanban type board, but XP style, where there's like not multiple states of there. It's like, am I working on this, or is it not even on the prioritization list in the backlog, but not ready for the current iteration or one of these iterations. So like the way you think of it is like time flows. Like the oldest stuff here is at the very top, right? Top right, if we did it by 10 iterations back. And then older, newer to the current week, and then down into the future for everything that we've currently refined and prioritized, and then further into the future for things that we know we want to prioritize, but we haven't yet refined. And then down here at the bottom is like, you know, everything that's in the backlog or not going to do or waiting further demand.
Sure.
So it's a one view, easy to see like what is the prioritization for everything. But again, the way the ordering of the boards work, and they're like scoped to a single, you know, each in the database, each list is its own island and has its own priority and knows nothing about each other. So that makes it more difficult to work that way.
Right. Yeah. The way that our boards work is like a very classic Kanban. There's no like flow implied from one to the next.
So for context, Gabe and I have discussed this a lot for years, and he's an ex-pivotal tracker user, and as you saw from his comments, liked it. And I think this is it's discussed many times. We would like to have a direction this way, like maybe an alternate form of the board, an emergent planning style velocity board, as opposed to where you manually drag things around into iterations, which is all you can currently do, which defeats the whole purpose of this. This is like, you're not trying to predict the future, yesterday's weather, whatever you've currently gotten, whatever you did in the past, including like lower capacity is what's influencing the future. Like as you can see here for Summit, ideally we would be able to say, hey, our team strength was 0 on this week, therefore it should count 0% towards calculating our velocity. And as you can see, like Pivotal Tracker has that same sort of thing here. You could override.
I spent many years running a pivotal board, so I'm familiar with the way it works. And what's interesting is like I was coming from a team where we really kind of wanted to be doing things in more of the Jira Kanban way. So it was like, it was like trying to put on a shoe that didn't fit, and we were baffled by the functionality because we just had the wrong mindset coming into trying to use the tool.
Right. It's all just people's experience, because like in the 13 years of Tracker, I can't count how many people it's like loathed Jira, and even outside of Tracker, like other developers, like loathed the Jira workflow and wanted to use anything that's simpler, whether it was Pivotal Tracker or Asana or Trello or
Yeah.
anything more just like a Kanban board.
Well, what the sense I'm getting from this is that you're experiencing the same sort of angst or friction that my team had, but in reverse, where the tool that we've got doesn't seem like it suits very well an emergent iteration planning workflow.
Right, which is, it's not just something that I'm pulling out of my hat. Like this is the way, XP, the first agile methodology, like it's the way it works.
Right.
And if you modern Scrum, like there's no more like I'm committing to a concept of committing to things in the current iteration. It explicitly also talks about, measure your velocity and use that to calculate, you measure your past velocity, use that to calculate and determine how much you can get done, which is, the same as traditional XP.
Mm-hmm.
At least one of the flavors of Scrum. I never did Scrum a lot, so I know there's like a couple of camps, but at least one of the camps like it says recommends to do that and has documentation around it as well. So it's not like this is just a crazy one-off flow. It's like standard XP and Scrum.
Yeah. So before you made the browser extension, what did you try in order to like get this to support your workflow?
We didn't. This workflow arose from a real need of the stakeholders multiple times coming and pushing for an unreasonable deadline, to be blunt. And this allowed us in the initial release, in the beta release, and in the GA release to push back against that effectively and say, no, here is what the velocity says, and you're not giving us more people. Actually, you're taking them away for AI. Therefore, this is when it will get done. So your two choices are be okay with that or remove scope. And in both cases, it was remove scope. And then we're like, okay, drag all of those down. And then the latest, you can put just a placeholder here. That's like a release marker. You can sort of see those things.
They're flags in Pivotal.
Yeah, like right here, initial demo to investors and things like that. Like in the red, if you're predicted to miss them. We sort of did the same thing. We had like a GA release marker, and it's like, okay, well, if you drag everything below that marker, then that marker now is in the iteration you want in 16.0, and we have, quantifiably based on our actual velocity and everybody not trying to kill themselves and work overtime, have a reasonable expectation of meeting that, and we did. So, like, yes, this arose out of the real need to be able to push back on unreasonable deadlines from product, which, for what it's worth, the currently documented GitLab product flow does not do. It's very, again, being completely blunt, naive in that way. It's more product throws things over the wall and then they happen, and there's no no accounting for the deep feedback loops that have to happen there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that our boards are maybe set up to best support kind of like the waterfall that calls itself agile sort of flow.
Exactly.
Yeah. What this makes me wonder is like, this is such a different use case for a Kanban board that it almost, and this is me spitballing. I'm not the designer for boards, but it makes me wonder if we should have, some option when you're creating a board that's like, create this kind or create that kind.
Exactly. And that's what Gabe's plan is. And like, I was at a drink up a few months ago with an ex-Pivotal colleague, and I was like, does nobody really work this way? And he's like, not so much, but the way to sell this, the way to explain it in a way that makes sense to people, it's like a Kanban board, but rather than your work in process being fixed, which is like, obviously that's going to vary, depending on the people you have or any sorts of other factors, you're automatically determining your work in process for every iteration based on what you've gotten done in the past, assuming a consistent team strength, consistent team experience. So that's the key. It's like a Kanban board, but you're automatically determining your work in process limit.
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense. Like, why not base that on actual metrics, which gives you better predictability from product, which is, in my opinion, like what product should really care about. It's like, okay, without asking the team to do a death march, when can I actually expect these things? And if it's not when I need it by, what do I have to drag out to get it by when I need it by? And is that an acceptable MVP? And it's like metrics and data-driven answers to those questions rather than randomly guessing at them.
Mm-hmm.
And from the team's perspective, they love it because it's impossible. Like you cannot put 10 pounds of flour into a 5-pound bag. You can't put 20 points of work into a 10-point iteration. It's just not going to happen. The markers will flow down. So it's like removes the ability of stakeholders to try to coerce you to do more. It's like, no, this is what we do. And like, if you think we don't go fast enough in general, okay, that's a separate question. But this is how fast we have historically gone.
Right. And that may be a matter of,
right?
Everybody agreeing about what different weights mean, all that sort of thing. Like,
well,
there's different knobs and levers for that.
Which is the importance of having a consistent team with consistent experience working on the same backlog of the same project. And most importantly, the iteration planning meeting is sync. So when you discuss them and when you rock, paper, scissors to estimate them, everybody gets this tribal knowledge and feel for like, this is the 1, this is the 2, this is the 3, this is the 5. And consistent. Rolling that up across teams to try to predict it on a higher level is a much harder problem. Gabe and I have discussed this. I don't think anybody's ever solved that, right? How do you normalize for different teams having different points? But like single team, same one team, one backlog, it works great once you get that tribal knowledge established. It's better than random guesses by far, I will say, in its ability to predict accurately.
So I don't know what
you want me to share or
sorry?
You still want me to keep sharing?
It's okay. You can leave it if you want. I'm not sure if we'll need to refer back to it. I'm
going to take it off just so
yeah.
we can have.
So I'm not sure what I can do in my role to help with the fact that our boards are just not set up for emergent iteration.
Even aside from this, even completely aside from emergent iterations, like people that have 3 panels or lists. For whatever workflow, they're still going to have that problem of the wasted space.
So this is what I was going to ask is like, do you use boards in the way that GitLab is designed for boards to work at all?
Well, even if I did, like they would still either scroll or have wasted space.
That's what I wanted to see is like, are you
regardless of how many lists I had or didn't have, right? It would still be an issue. The original point of this call.
Well, but are you actually running into that problem at all?
Well, we are because you saw the
well, but I mean, like in a more waterfall-y Kanban board sort of setup, are you running into that at all? I don't know if you're actually using any boards in that way.
One of the philosophies of this approach is like one board per project. Therefore, everybody, all stakeholders have the same view of the project. They're looking at the same list of stories, the same iterations. We don't have multiple boards. We use the hierarchy and the epics for sort of high-level planning and organization, but as far as boards, 1 per project. So we have 1 for the workspaces feature, and then the web IDE did not follow this process. We've just decided with all of our team staffing changes, they're going to start following this. So they're going to have their own board because that's effectively a separate backlog, separate feature.
Sure. Okay. So you don't have like a personal board where you're like moving statuses or anything.
No, that's the point. This is the only board we have.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll try to look at the roadmap view, but because of the difficulty of it, there's not automation in assigning all of the correct milestones to the future iterations. That's something we'd like to automate, but without that, the roadmap's based on the milestones. So it's often not accurately reflecting the future, and you have to have like a ton planned out in the future for iterations as well for that to work.
Right.
But again, you went one board, but like sometimes I try to look at the milestone. Most other people don't, or the roadmap to just see what it's saying, and the epic list hierarchy board, which again has the same issue as lists. Every time you add something new, it pops to the top, which sort of breaks it.
Yeah,
for
I think
priority.
things getting added to the top of the list is a known pain point. I've heard, I don't remember if it was Nick Brandt or Nick Leonard mentioned that before as well as like something that trips people up.
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna hate me saying this, but Tracker makes it configurable if you go to the top or the bottom.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think that's a tricky thing, right? Is I think that
People want it different for different cases. Yeah.
yeah, and we as an organization, I think, have a like, what's the term that they use? Oh, why am I blanking on this? I can't think of the word. Someone mentioned this to me recently. Yeah, I think we have like a convention over configuration bias, like on purpose. So teams tend
Which
to
is
avoid
fine,
trying
but
to
I think
add in
both
lots of
of those,
different options and try to like find a sensible convention. But this leads to situations where people say one size all doesn't fit the thing I'm trying to do. I think there's
right.
something to think about
I
with
think
the
there's
list
different boards.
widths because yeah, that issue I think is really illustrative because there are people complaining in both cardinal directions. There are people saying I don't want to scroll left, right, and people saying I don't want to scroll up and down.
Which all of them are, I want to see more information without having to scroll, right?
Yeah,
And the same
but I
problem
think that they're
causing
very different problems because for you everything's in one column, so you want to see more of that one column, and you don't need a lot of. You only have three going on, so you can afford for those three to get real fat and take up all your space. For people who have like a workflow step based Kanban board, they're probably wide and shallow. So for them, it might be more like I wish there was some way to fit more of these on a screen or something. Um,
That's why I think that the way Tracker does it, the toggle like between fixed and automatic, and then within fixed being able to control it, that gives people complete control. It's like I want to see one really wide list, and I don't care if I scroll horizontally, or no, I want to see all my lists on the screen. I don't care if I scroll vertically. And then within that mode, the automatic mode to see them all on the screen. Okay, at least make them as dense as possible. So even though I want to see them all on the screen, I'm going to see as many as are possible before I have to scroll vertically.
I do think, I haven't been here very long. I started in October, so I don't know if people have had discussions around this before. They probably have, and I don't know where it's gone or where it's going.
Honestly, I think
Say
it's like
a density thing about like, dense, comfortable, lots of space or whatever seems broadly applicable. I don't know. I could go back to the design team and ask them like, hey, what's everybody's take on that? Because that does seem like a reasonable thing that's maybe like one setting for the user at a high level that affects list views, affects boards, all kinds of stuff.
I may be being unfair to the team that does it, but honestly, I think it's a bit of a Stockholm syndrome. I never see any new UI features really happen on boards. Not a lot of activity. And like I said, I talked with Gabe a lot about this, and he would like to have a different mode of boards where they behave this way. But for this particular layout concerns, I think it applies to both. People may have with any workflow may have variable number of panels and variable screen sizes, and want to see more vertically or want to see more horizontally.
Yeah, I think part of it too, not for your workflow, but part of it for a more like I've got 6 columns and I'm moving an issue along the row kind of workflow is that there are certain things you have to drag and drop for that you don't necessarily have to drag and drop for, like to close an issue. You have to drag it over to closed, or you have to open it and close it from there, as opposed to having like close be in the action menu for the
Right.
card while it's in the column or something. So there might be ways to address some of the pain points that other people are having too. But for what you're talking about,
And with that case,
yeah,
with
there's
5 or
just like
6
not enough
columns
space.
on a small laptop screen, like you're gonna have to do some horizontal scrolling to get, the 2 panels that you want to drag between into view.
Yeah, the horizontal scrolling is kind of unavoidable in a Kanban setup where you've got more than 3 or 4 columns. Um,
And you can collapse columns too, right? Like
yeah.
if you want to drag something from even in that scenario, say, all right, I want to drag something from the top to the bottom. I'm changing the priority of this. Not that these are like broken for prioritization because everything pops to the top, but ignoring that, say like you were trying to use it for priority, then you could collapse all of the other lists. And if it did, the one that you wanted to drag from the top and the bottom did take the whole width, like it does with, if you turned on that JavaScript lit or did the auto width, then it's easier to drag from the top and the bottom without having to, okay, drag up, let it auto scroll or something like that. Or right click,
Mhm.
send to top, and then try to drag it down to where it should be now that you got it at the top.
Sure. The less that each item in the column wraps, then the less vertical
Well,
space to
the
take up.
more items you can see,
Yeah.
then less likely it is you're going to have to like try to do some form of vertical scrolling to get something dragged a large vertical distance.
Hmm. Interesting.
But all else aside, I'm ecstatic to have any eyes on improving the board design in any way. It seems like it's one of those things that just seems to stagnate in the 4.5 years that I've been here.
Well,
Since
yeah,
my
I don't know, I don't know about the past. I do know Nick Brandt has some design improvements for boards that we want to work on soon. I think the whole plan team has just been so wrapped up in the work items migration that it was like the thing that got cast aside for a while, priority wise. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they would like to do, and that I'm very eager to help them get into the product as soon as we can. Um, but none of that right now, I don't think, is about the stuff you're talking about, which is why it's interesting to get that feedback.
and some of the prioritization things, like the fact that things go to the top, the prioritization is just like completely isolated to a list and it has no concept of, a cross-board priority. There's some scenarios, like I haven't got the exact reproduction down, but like changing the priority on a completely different board will affect the priority on this one because it's reasons. I don't know.
Oh, like I hadn't heard of that, but
Maybe I'm
maybe
lying
the
there, but
issue owns the
it,
prioritization, and that's why.
yeah. And a lot of those are just, they're tied to the way that the priority is handled under the covers in the database, which is just like
Right, the list doesn't own it, the issue
any of
does or
these used to.
something.
Yeah, it's like per list.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. Well, I think in the short term, there are probably some CSS things you can add to your browser extension that will do some of the stuff you're
Oh yeah,
talking
tighten up
about
the
for you.
padding and margin. Like I was gonna try that.
But the notion of like having a like emergent iteration planning style board is very interesting.
Yeah, definitely talk to Gabe about that.
Although, have you considered just not using a board at all and just using the issue list and just oh, but the issue list is not reorderable. Right, that's the whole problem.
Not reorderable.
Yeah.
It doesn't show the iterations. It doesn't like it.
Mm.
It doesn't show all of this information to all the stakeholders in a single dense information rich
Right.
place.
Yeah. The list
The
view
whole
is
philosophy
definitely
behind
not
this.
dense at all. Yeah, that's a good point.
Like
But also,
everybody
you can't
sees
do
the
what you're doing
same
in
thing.
reorder.
Regardless of what stakeholder looks at this board, like they see the same thing. It's
Yeah.
not like I have some view that isn't what other people see, and then there's the ensuing miscommunications because of that.
Coincidentally, have you had problems with people accidentally editing this board?
No, it's only used by our team.
Hmm.
Like there's a lot of problems with if the data and the labels and the milestones and the iterations are not exactly right on all of the issues, it just breaks. And like my error UI is it just dumps out to the console, hey, this is what you need to fix. Otherwise, the extension just will completely break. Like just shows little exclamation marks and doesn't do anything on the button.
Hmm.
Which again, that's the best the best UI I can have in a single JavaScript file with no imports and nothing. Like the UI is dump the errors in the console.
Sure. Hmm.
And but I was like considering just trying to skunkworks a board on my own that like was an MVP of this, but now that we've gotten more sane about all the borrows and plan actually has some people, some engineers being consistent, and maybe work items are wrapping up. I'm hopeful that maybe some of these things can start getting addressed in the actual products, especially around iterations. Iterations are also like uh, designed wrong at the schema level for this. Right? There's a database level foreign key relationship between an issue and an iteration, which is just a no-go for this sort of emergent thing that you want. You
Right. Yeah.
can't.
It's manually maintained
If
as
I
a.
drag something from the top to the bottom, I can't like rewrite, all of those records every time to recalculate the
Yeah.
iterations. That's
Yeah.
like
That would be a lot.
that would blow up the database.
That's an interesting point too.
Which is the way Tracker does it. It has the velocity algorithm, which is simple, is calculated on the front end and on the back end. And wherever iterations need to be displayed for reports or whatever on the back end or for the board on the front end, it just automatically calculates it
Right.
on the front end and inserts the iteration markers and data where they need to be.
Yeah. And it's just a calculated field, right? It's not a.
It's an algorithm that calculates it and just says, there's puts them in buckets in memory and then everything back end or front end renders the
That's
iteration.
that's tricky too, because then you really kind of have to spool it back to like, sure, you could have a, emergent iteration planning style board, but really you need an emergent iteration uh, planning style project.
Yeah, and I think that's what Gabe was saying. It's like he refers to it as like push based versus pull based, which are those are good ways to think about it. I don't think they map exactly, but it's like Kanban is I don't know, I can't really explain it, but maybe I have them backwards, but Kanban is like pulling things in as the work in process becomes empty. And the emergent velocity calculation of iterations is sort of like pushing this stuff in down into the future iterations as needed.
Yeah, it's like if you've got like a, mid 20th century style desk with like an inbox full of paper and you're taking the papers off the bottom and the inbox keeps filling up and you're just taking off as many as you can within the time you're working.
Right.
Huh. Yeah, that is.
And it's predicting like when you'll get done with the pile because it knows how many pieces of paper you do every week on average.
Yeah, except for the time tracking plugin, we don't do anything about velocity natively, right?
Uh, like the way we have implemented iterations does not support this approach at all because of the hard-coded relationship. Like
Right.
the way iterations only work is if you manually drag things between iterations.
Yeah, they're essentially like a label or an assignee.
Well, it's just a piece of metadata assigned to it, but it's like hard-coded in a database. You have to manually drag them between. The only automated part of it is like whatever you didn't get done in a current iteration automatically rolls over to the next one and gets stuck in it. So that the past iterations only contain closed items. But like that, obviously is not doesn't work at all for us, where we want to automatically calculate everything we have in the prioritized lane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder. There's been
we would have to drag everything every single time, every week that rolled over. Like, no,
yeah,
defeats the whole purpose of it. It shouldn't. That would be far too onerous of a manual task to get that same data.
there's been
Hence,
discussion
hatch
of
process
like,
on top of it.
sorry.
Hence our hatch process and the board and all of the extension and everything on top of it to be able to get that data somehow, even though underlying the iterations don't support it in the current implementation.
Mm-hmm. So what do you actually do about the iteration data structure today? Do you just ignore it?
Like the part that we can leverage is, as every week rolls over, it takes whatever was in the current iteration. Here, I'll share my screen. If you look at our iterations, like the way we design it, like each of these in the done for the past iterations is actually an iteration in the database. And so like when this iteration rolls over, the current one, this week's iteration, anything that is open will automatically get rolled over to the current iteration, and then whatever had been closed during that iteration will get closed. So that's how this thing. But and it automatically calculates the velocity for the past iterations, right? Or the number of points and the number of issues they had. So they do give us all of that metadata from the past iterations that allow us to calculate all of this stuff. All of this is automatically calculated with our custom logic and the extension. This whole lane is one iteration in the database. It's the current iteration, right?
So you're putting everything in the current iteration, and then whatever doesn't.
All of these markers are just sort of like meta iteration markers that we put in there because we don't plan in the future. And that's actually like a little UX point. Like it forces us to have at least 3 current iterations, like current week and 2 in the future, and we wouldn't even need that. I just assume make it 1. There's only one pre-calculated.
You could do that though, right? Because like you're calculating all of those anyway in your browser extension.
No, I mean like if you look at the Arcadence,
I see.
It's calculating these in the future, but all of our stuff, everything that we have in that entire lane, right? Everything in this prioritized lane is in this current iteration, and there's no need or reason for us to have anything in these future ones. So I would just assume in the settings for this cadence, wherever that is, I don't even know where you get to the settings. Somewhere you get to the settings to say, oh, it's here next to the right. Like number of upcoming iterations. I like to make this 0. We never use them. But that's only because, the way we typed it on top. Ideally, this would just be like automatically calculate them and assign them. But because of all the reasons I said, especially mainly them iterations and issues having a hard-coded relationship in the database, it's not even a thing. And the enable rollover, that's what I was talking about. So like everything that's in the current iteration, once it rolls over to the most recent done one, everything that's open gets moved to the next current one. So that's the part of the automation, as well as the calculation of everything that was in of the metadata of all of the previous issues, the number of points and the number of issues that we rely on via the API to calculate all of the future.
And this must also, because you have to do it this way, this must also make all of your like iteration, burn down charts and everything wacky. Because every iteration starts.
Well, the whole burn up and burn down charts, that's a whole other topic. They're useless to me and our team, because the burn up and burn down charts only span one iteration. And it's like, well, okay, I don't really care how much I've gotten done in this iteration. What I care is like everything that I have prioritized. What is my burn down chart and what is my scope creep? And there was just a big long discussion on that topic where I gave some feedback on a separate issue. Ideally the burn down and burn up chart would be all of the past and all of the future, and
Right.
also incorporate ideas of like scope creep. Here's the scope that you've added over this period of time, and if you extrapolate that out, here's how much scope you're going to expect to add, which actually impacts your overall completion date for some milestone way in the future. But currently the burn up and burn down charts are if you look at this, go back, like they're on the, I don't know where they show up. They show up on, oh yeah, the per iteration, right? So like that one has nothing. This one is like,
Well, the current iteration starts today, so
yeah,
on
so
that.
it's like the burn down, it's not taking into account what we have in the future, because everything's in the same iteration. And this doesn't seem to be, that's a short answer to the question. I never look at this because it doesn't work in any useful way for
Right. Well, the equivalent thing that you care about, you're already calculating yourself in your browser extension for your planning board.
Exactly, but it would be nice to be able to visualize it as a graph. Like, this, rather than 1 week, this would end, and rather than being at the iteration level, it would be at the cadence level, and the burn down chart would go all the way to everything we have prioritized. That would be useful to visualize. And yeah, we can get it just by looking at this date, but graphs are always nice.
I wonder if there might actually be a way. I'm not as familiar with this feature as I could be yet, but I think we do have like customized value stream dashboards. There might actually be a way to make some charts for some of the stuff that you want to look at.
Yeah, we have the roadmap, which is like this, and you can expand it out. But again, this is all predicated upon viable maturity. That's the main phase that we're in right now, and it's got all the sub ethics and issues. But like this is all predicated upon all of this being refined, estimated, and assigned an upcoming release marker, release label, release. I guess that's the milestone. But that's not the reality. The reality is we try to estimate, maybe a couple of months, 4 to 8, at least 8 iterations out, just so that we, probably ideally 1 to 3 releases. So 4 to 12 iterations out. And if we have that much filled up, it's like, okay, we can at least predict when anything within the next 1 to 3 iterations is going to be delivered. And we can know that we're not going to run out of work for people to do within that period of time, And so it's like a normal flow where weekly we're always figuring out, okay, everything that's in here that's tagged with the next 1 to 3 iterations, we're going to assign it for refinement. Once it's refined, then we'll prioritize it over here at the bottom and get the data that way. But again, the roadmap view doesn't fit with that. It's like, well, you can't predict that far out in the future. I don't even know how you would do it. You could say, all right, like our average estimated issue size is like a 2 or 2.5 or whatever. Assume everything that we have is a 2.5, or maybe in the backlog we just guess and say, all right, everything is like an 8 or a 13 if we think it's going to be big, and it'll get broken down in refinement, and then that would possibly make this roadmap view more useful. But again, that's an anti-pattern because you're getting into the trying to predict the future again, rather than letting the past tell you what it's going to be for everything that is actually refined, and therefore will be good data flowing into the calculation.
So when your team does your IPM, who's usually running it? Who's sharing their screen?
Could honestly be anybody. We have a brand new EM. Well, as of 4 months ago, our PM, we have a new PM as of a month ago, and we have 5 new total engineers starting. But because I've sort of championed this process, sometimes I'll run it. We were in a bit of a chaos in the push for the GA, and then we lost the PM in the middle of, then we lost our EM, we got a new EM, then we lost the PM. And so we haven't been in a real healthy process state for a while. And we're feeling that because now customers are saying, well, when can you get this thing done? We really need that thing. And we're like, well, ordinarily we'd have 8 to 12 iterations of stuff full, but currently we don't, because we just got our new PM, and she was at started 1 week, had summit for 1 week, and then COVID the next week.
Oh gosh.
Behind. Prior to that, the PM would run them. Sometimes I would run them. It really doesn't matter. It's really just a facilitator role, because you're going down, okay, everything here that's not estimated, we're going to discuss it, make sure nobody has any questions or blockers, and then we're going to estimate it and then move on to the next one. No more than 5 minutes. If you have to talk about it more than 5 minutes, then it probably hasn't been refined adequately, and we kick it back out for further refinement.
Once your new PM gets up to speed, how do you think she's going to be interacting with this board outside of that meeting?
I mean, we have our process documented. Which we've just now got back into the flow of, right? So there's the high level planning, the async refinement, the sync prioritization, and then the IPM. So the main focus for the PM and the EM and the tech leads are this. What of our epics are viable? I don't know why. How do I make it viable? I just want to open this epic. Can I? Yeah. So basically this viable maturity epic, which is like a subset of our overall category strategy, right? We've already done minimal, beta, GA, now we're on viable. And the EM and the PM and the high level planning mostly just focuses around this. Like, what do we need to do next? Anything that does for the process gets assigned the next 1 to 3 releases. It gets kicked out for refinement, assigned to engineers. And then after it's refined, it gets prioritized into the board here. And then it will show up without a weight, and then it will get discussed and weighted during the next PM. And the other, like, there's a lot of magic that happens in the IPM, and the reason that it's sync, it also gives everybody eyes on what's going on, at least seeing the issue discussed for at least up to 5 minutes, to bring their experience, their blockers, to let some bring up issues that may not have come out in refinement, that may be problems or things we need to be aware of. Issues that need more design, will often come up in an IPM. Like, the questions that arise will be like, oh, this actually needs to get more design done on it. Let's deprioritize that and send it back for more refinement.
Does your
Or
group have a
more
designer?
design stories. Go ahead.
Does your
Sorry.
group have a designer? I don't remember.
Yeah, Taylor Vanderheim.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
Yeah, he's doing a great job. We just, now that we have an EM and a PM and we have engineers, other than just the three we had that were keeping the lights on, we're hoping to implement a lot of his awesome designs he's been coming up with.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, remote development is there's some good UI and some meaty stuff to dig into it, but it's also extremely back-end heavy. There's like this vast iceberg of Kubernetes and all sorts of stuff going on underneath it that we spend a lot of our time on.
I don't know if I have any other questions about this. I think this is some good insight into like the way that your team is using this stuff. And I do think that concerns about like I'm not seeing enough stuff on the screen, whether I wish more of it were coming in from the right or more of it were coming up from the bottom, separate issue. Seems, like a generalizable thing.
Yeah, it's a minor thing, but it's a usability thing. Yeah, it's just annoying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think the like things get added to the top. It's another, hearing it again for another time in a different use case where it's like not what would be helpful for somebody.
It just breaks the usage of the lists or for prioritization. It's like, no, I don't want, that's not the highest priority just because I just added it. Like, if anything, it should default to the lowest priority.
Yeah.
And especially in this flow, it breaks it even more because we rely on that prioritization to know where things fall in the iteration. So
right. Although at least in theory, things should only be showing up suddenly at the top of your pseudo icebox, right?
honestly, so like that's a really great question. Let's try that.
Like if you just create an issue and add the prioritized label, it probably will pop to the top, but I think things drop where you drop them.
Like I'll just randomly take this from right here and in a completely separate window, I'm going to mark it prioritized.
Yeah, that might pop it up to the top, but it depends on what list priority it already has.
Well, and the thing is, this is the way we normally do it. Like
that is the way you normally do it. Is you change it this way, you're not dragging them between columns.
No, I mean,
yeah, I see.
We honestly haven't done the prioritization part in a healthy way, like for a long time.
You've had disruption. You're re-inoculating. You're growing the starter back again.
So if we did this, we set this to prioritize. I'm just going to make a note. Working on this and comparing. May. And we also need to assign it. This is all manual. To the current iteration, not the future one. The only one we use. And the way this it's already refined, it follows our process. I'm going to click that. And then over here, okay, it's not Ajaxy, so I didn't automatically.
Yeah, the automatic updates to boards is something I really wish we could. Although I could see how that could get overwhelming, but
boom, went to the top.
Yeah.
So no, move to the end. There we go. Recalculate things. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of using things how we want, it's still kind of broken if we don't explicitly stay on top of the prioritization here, which it's really hard to do because every time you prioritize something, it's going to screw it up.
Sure.
So having added to the bottom would be great. Honestly, I'd say that's like a way higher priority now that I think of it than anything about the layout or the widths of the boards.
Yeah. I wonder, there might actually be something with your browser extension that you can do for that. I'm not sure, but
Well, but you couldn't do it in the background like this. This all happened in the database.
oh, I see what you mean. Right. Of course. I
That
forgot that
list
you're
and that label
doing it over here.
at the top. There's nothing I could do. But presumably, like, there's a concept of this, right? I don't know if this is all client side or whatever, but if we
I
just
took a look at this
toggle in
menu.
the setting,
Yeah. Yeah, those make GraphQL calls to change something about prioritization. I took a look at this menu because I wanted to add a close issue from there, but it's actually more complicated because that menu belongs to the list, not the issue.
yeah. And the code about prioritization is and how the priorities are assigned is kind of cray-cray. I've looked at it briefly under the covers and yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's it'd be great if it worked the way we wanted it to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
Which isn't, like I said, isn't arbitrary, like has had real tangible benefits multiple times in the past for us to be able to communicate to stakeholders if not, we are going to be able to meet the milestones that they want
yeah.
and let's take action accordingly and know exactly how much scope we need to move down to be able to meet that. But that all assumes it's prioritized, right? And doesn't keep having new stuff get jammed to the top. Actually, I can't believe I didn't realize that one more now, but yeah, it breaks our flow even more than I thought every time we prioritize something.
What are you usually doing when you're making those changes? Is there literally just someone who's going and just like move to bottom, move to bottom, move to bottom on everything, or
No, honestly, like except for when we got close to the beta and GA push, it was the only things that were prioritized at that point were everything in the scope. And the previous PM sort of did an anti-pattern for the GA push, and we just dragged everything out of it. Which is like, that wasn't in GA scope, which is like an alternate approach. Then it doesn't matter what order they're all in scope, but ideally, everything should be in order. So when somebody looks, we would like to automate it to where the milestones are automatically assigned based on what iteration they fall into, right? But if the priority is constantly getting screwed up every time you relabel something, then
right, then you would just be constantly changing iterations on a bunch of stuff that you didn't even mean to be editing.
exactly.
Yeah. 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 Tricky to make it work for this.
And like that assigning the milestones correctly, like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. And we would love to do that. And we're really close to being able to do it automatically, except for like all of these subtle but fundamental ways it's just broken to be able to accomplish that. So when customers look at a random issue in the backlog, they could say, oh, this is expected to be in 17.3. Okay, good. Whereas now it's likely to just say next 1 to 3 releases because that's like our default until we actually start something and that triggers it to be in the current iteration.
There is supposed to be
current release.
There's supposed to be more functionality around custom fields in work items that's coming sometime this year. That might actually be something that's interesting.
Yeah, I think work items will unlock a lot.
Huh?
I think work items will unlock a lot.
Yes.
I'm not really sure what. Like I haven't thought about it yet.
Yeah, I think well, The
And
thing that
that,
would be interesting about custom fields is that for some of the use cases you're talking about, you may at least be able to have a custom field on the issue that you can control that will do the thing you want, and maybe you don't use iterations. Maybe you have a field called iteration that you do something else with or something, you know?
or yeah, or the custom field is like priority. And then we hack it to sort based on that and ignore whatever the real board priority is. But then it's just getting further and further away from any way that boards are intended or
Yeah.
designed to be used.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, it makes you wonder if you should just like use our API to make your own board for it or something, you know? But that doesn't
Yeah,
solve all those
is
problems. It's essentially what you're doing, kind of. You're just
what I
reusing
was dreaming of
our
until
UI.
the situation of engineers being dedicated to plan and not taken away and actually getting some work done got better. And I have some hope now that Gabe is gonna get some of these things in the foreseeable future more than I had in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're like 10 minutes over, or actually 20 minutes over, I guess. Sorry, the time that I had set aside for this. I don't know if I'm keeping you from anything. I
Oh,
mean, I guess if anything, I'm keeping you from a day off. But
no, it's fine. I was planning on working anyway. Like I said, that I often work on the slow days, especially coding, that I can get in the zone and nothing's going on.
yeah. But I think this is
If no
think
kids, no pets, no plants. I can work whenever I want. It's nice. Yeah, GitLab.
about. um I'll share this with Nick and we'll see, if there's some stuff that we can work on. I think actually I should probably talk to Danica too about this because there may be, extant research that is right in line with some of the stuff you're talking about. And
Definitely
maybe
Gabe.
there's some stuff we can tweak. Huh?
Gabe can definitely represent my views probably as almost as good as I can.
Sure. Yeah, but I'll go back to them and see, see what I can tweak. I do think that it's illuminating that like, oh yeah, the way that our boards work just does not support this way that many teams work.
Yeah, and maybe not even many teams, but like, can you see the benefit of working this way and like it gives you a lot of benefits.
Yeah, I think the key is that you have to be a team that's able to decide to do that for yourself. In my
Right.
past experience, the reason we kept hitting our head on it is that we weren't in control of what we were working on next. It was dictated at the organizational level, and then we had to scramble to be like, okay, when are we told we're delivering that? Great. How do we work backwards from there? And
Right. And the my experience with Tracker is like joining Pivotal in about 06, 07. And there was like no good agile planning tools at that point in time. Rami, the founder of Pivotal, like founded the company around this way, around XP, because he started around, before the turn of the century with Kent Beck, Ward Cunningham, all those guys that founded Agile. That was the way the company was founded, and it was intentionally designed to be a consultancy that brought in clients and taught them how to work that way, to do XP, to do pairing, to do pair programming, to do TDD, and to work in these healthy ways that are, traditional XP style. All of the Twitter, like lots of the startups of that era, and Tracker evolved as just an internal tool to represent that process and be exactly the tool that worked well with that process. So that's why it works almost perfectly for that process and not well for, something that would be considered an anti-pattern in traditional XP, like anything that's waterfallish or, coercive deadline-ish.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's intentionally designed to not allow that, which is why this process is great for engineers once they realize it's like, no, they can't coerce you. The velocity is the velocity. You can't pretend it's something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll talk
Feel
with.
free to pull me into any discussions, or I'm happy to give feedback. Like, I'm planning on staying at GitLab for a while, so I would love to help mold the product to be better for these things. And that's why, I've been talking to Gabe about this for years. So anything I can do to help, or information, or more panels, or to rant at other people to get them to understand our viewpoint, happy to do it.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's in the recording, so they'll see it too. But I'll let them know.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chad.
Thank you,
Great
Chad.
meeting, by the way.
Yeah, good to talk with you. Have a great still working but rest of your day off.
All right,
And I'll
bye.
see you around.